So imagine this. Your company rolls out a brand new policy. It's written down, it's in black and white, it's the exact same for every single employee. But is it really? Today we're going to dig into how one single rule can create dozens of totally different realities and how each one is shaped by something you might not expect, your personality. And we're going to unpack all of this using a really fascinating study on a pretty controversial topic, workplace drug testing. And this, right here, gets to the heart of the whole thing. On one side, you've got the official written policy. Simple enough, it's for safety. But on the other side, you have what people actually think. For one person, yeah, it's a safety measure. But for the person at the next desk, it feels like a total invasion of privacy. And for someone else, it feels like the company is just looking for a reason to target people. Same words, same rules, but completely different worlds. So why? What is causing this huge gap between the policy as it's written and the policy as it's actually experienced? All right, so here's our game plan for this explainer. We're going to talk about this idea of one policy creating different realities. We'll look at why perception is such a huge problem, and then we'll go inside the actual investigation that put this to the test. We'll uncover 4 psychological clues, see what the data actually revealed, and trust me, there's a big surprise in there. And then we'll wrap up with why all of this really, really matters. So let's jump right in with the first piece of this puzzle, this whole idea of one policy, many realities, and what is really the myth of a single objective truth at work. You know, the common assumption, it makes perfect sense on the surface, is that if a rule is written down clearly, then of course everyone's going to see it the same way, right? I mean, it's logical. But the researchers behind this study, they suspected this way of thinking was not just wrong, but kind of dangerously wrong, because it completely ignores the human element in the equation. And this leads us straight into what we're calling the perception problem. Because how we see a policy, how we feel about it, well, that isn't some minor detail. It changes everything about how we act at work. This is where perception really hits the bottom line. If people see a policy in a positive light, you get amazing things: trust in leadership, people who are committed to the company, higher job satisfaction. But if they see that exact same policy negatively, you get resentment, you get low morale, you can even get sabotage or people quitting. So the critical thing to understand isn't the policy itself, but how it lands with people. So this brings us to the investigation. To really figure out what's driving all these different perceptions, researchers went into a real company with a real live drug testing policy to see if they could finally crack the code. Okay, so here's the setup. The researchers went to a big petroleum company, and they surveyed 103 employees, a real mix of people, from truck drivers and mechanics to managers and office clerks. Now here is the absolute key. Every single one of them was subject to the exact same federally mandated random drug testing program. This is so important because it created a perfect natural experiment. Since the policy was identical for everybody, any differences in how they saw it had to be coming from somewhere else. It had to be coming from inside the employees themselves. So, what are these internal factors? Well, the researchers decided to focus on 4 specific psychological clues that they believed could predict whether an employee would view the drug testing program as a good thing or a bad thing. First up is something called locus of control. It's kind of a fancy term for a pretty simple question. Who do you believe is in charge of your life? Is it you? Is it other powerful people? Or is it all just random luck and chance? So the researchers predicted that people who believe their lives are governed mostly by chance or luck would probably see a controlling policy like drug testing way more negatively. Makes sense. Second factor, authoritarianism. You know, this is that rules are rules mindset. It's a deep-seated belief that you should respect authority and follow the rules without question. So the logical assumption here, obviously, was that people high in this trait would naturally support the policy. It's a rule from authority, after all. Now keep that thought in the back of your mind because there is a twist coming on this one. The third factor was really simple, your general attitude. Basically, how did you feel about drug testing in the first place, before you even started working at this company? And finally, number 4, social experience. This one's a bit more personal. Did you know someone, a friend, a family member, who had failed a drug test? The idea was that this kind of personal connection could create a really powerful negative bias. Okay, so we have our 4 factors. The researchers collected all the data. So what did they actually find? The single biggest, most important takeaway from this entire study is this number, 33%. So what does that mean? It means that a full 1/3 of the variation, the difference in how employees saw the exact same policy, could be explained just by these 4 internal personal factors. That is a massive finding. It confirms that our personality and our personal history, they aren't just minor influences. They are powerful, powerful drivers of our reality at work, and they operate completely independently of the actual rules on paper. So let's break this down. As predicted, if you believed more in chance, you saw the policy more negatively. If you had a negative general attitude to begin with, same thing. And if you knew someone who failed a test, you guessed it, more negative views. No big surprises there. But then look at authoritarianism. The rules are rules, people. Everyone expected them to be supportive, but the data showed the exact opposite. Higher authoritarianism was linked to a more negative view of the policy. Just a stunning twist that completely flips that common sense assumption on its head. Okay, this is really fascinating research, for sure. But so what? Why does this actually matter? Let's connect these findings to the real world of actually managing people. Well, the study basically gives us a roadmap for how to manage perception, not just policies. First, to fight back against those feelings of powerlessness that come from a belief in chance, you have to explain the why, really explain the reasoning. Second, since we know general attitudes are so important, you've got to proactively shape them. Educate people on a policy's benefits. And third, to reduce that negative social ripple effect, if you can, choose rehabilitation over termination. In the end, the researchers themselves really summarized it best. You simply cannot assume that everyone sees the rules the same way. This idea of a single, uniform perception of any policy, it's just a myth. And that brings us to maybe the most important takeaway from all of this. The crucial point is, this was never really about drug testing. Not really. Drug testing was just the lens the researchers used. This is about any rule, any policy, any big change you can think of. Performance reviews, return to office mandates, new software rollouts, all of them are subject to these same powerful, invisible forces of perception. Which leaves us with a final question to think about. Think about your own job, your own company. What rules or policies or procedures that seem so black and white on paper might actually be experienced in 100 different ways by the people you work with every single day? The answer to that question reveals the hidden psychological landscape that truly defines what a workplace is all about.